That rocket is carrying SDL, my custom rocket data logger. That isn't its first flight, but it's the first flight since I rewrote large portions of the code. I'll get to that, but for now, I should probably let you finish watching this launch. This is SDL, my rocket data logger. Chances are this is the first time you're seeing this project, so I'll link to the playlist in the description. But if I had to describe this project in one sentence, I'd say SDL is an experimental rocket tracking system designed to both track and log the flight of any model rocket, which it can do, but it had, and for that matter, still has some issues. But those issues might not be too obvious when you're watching the flights themselves. So if we use this whole diagram here, I can kind of point out that each of these numbers here was representing when the first and second flight would have logged data. Every roughly 0.2 seconds or 5 hertz, which was, well, quite honestly, horrible. And then these other smaller dots here roughly represent, I kind of ran out of room, the 32 hertz flight from flight 3. It's a lot better, roughly 0.03 seconds between each reading, which to you and me is roughly a blink of an eye. But to the rocket, that was 3.1 meters between each reading, which is still horrible. Once I saw that gap, I knew that needed to be fixed, and I needed to get that time down to 0.01 seconds or better, which is roughly like 100 hertz or higher. The obvious solution was just to speed up the sensors, but in this case, that wasn't really an option. Depending on which sensor we're talking about, some of them could output data at up to 2000 hertz, some even more, but actually reading that data was a completely different issue. Initially, SDL read sensors sort of like this. Probably better to be on this side, right? Yeah. Sort of like this. Read sensor 1 for a certain amount of time, sensor 2 for a certain amount of time, sensor 3, so on. Saved it, and then looped back to the beginning. While this works great when there's not too many sensors, that adds up quick. And in this case, that delay got to the, I'm not even going to try to write it at this angle, got to the 32 hertz, which wasn't really an acceptable option. Putting it another way, you wouldn't want to paint your wall, stare at it while it dries, and then put another coat on. You'd probably paint your wall, go do other stuff, and then paint a second coat after it's done drying. Which, in this case, is exactly what we want the MCU to do. Ask the sensors for some data, go do other stuff, then come back and get the data when it's ready. A little more like this. In this case, sensor 1 begins, 2 begins, 3 begins, and then 1 finishes, 2 finishes, 3 finishes. And then while that's going, it just saves whatever data it's ready. Instead of taking all the way over to here, it's multiple times shorter and much quicker, allowing it to run way faster than 32 hertz. Anyways, back to the garage now to continue with this video, but let me know in the comments if you want to see more whiteboard things, and maybe ones that have a bit more detail than this, but just let me know if it's interesting. Might actually have to get my own. I'm kind of borrowing this from a robotics team right now. Depending on the microcontroller you're using, there are two main ways to implement this. The first option checks the sensor at a fixed rate, and the second reacts to the sensor's output. The first option works by reading the sensor, saving the data, and then comparing the MCU time to the time that the sensor was last read, say 200 milliseconds, and then doing other stuff in the meantime. That will work on basically every microcontroller, from the Atmega 328P, from classic Arduinos, all the way to more modern stuff like the STM32H7 or N6, but it's not always the best option. The second option is to use the built-in peripherals on most modern MCUs. This would allow the MCU to react to the new data rather than reacting on a predetermined schedule in the firmware itself. In this case, I simply set the MCU to tell the sensors to begin a reading and then go on to do other things like transmit data, save data, or whatever needs to get done. and the SPI peripheral itself will interrupt the MCU when new data is available and run a function to save it to memory. In the future, I could even go further and implement DMA, or direct memory access, to allow the peripheral to save it without the CPU getting involved at all. So now that we've identified the problem and a possible solution, I went through the sensors one by one and started converting them to use the peripherals provided by the STM32G474 microcontroller, starting with the Hi-G accelerometer, which went according to plan. And after thoroughly testing it, I did the same with the BMI 088 and the ICM 42670, which all worked, at least individually. When running in isolation, there were no issues at all. But when they were all running at once, the interrupts used to save the data conflicted with each other. In this case, the Nested Vectored Interrupt Controller, or NVIC, was having issues prioritizing which sensors should go at what time. And I mean, fair enough, I never actually told the controller what to prioritize. When compared to older MCUs, which I personally have a bit more experience with, the STM Interrupt Controller offers a lot more control, allowing you to prioritize what goes first when two interrupts happen to conflict, which, when you're running 3 sensors at up to, or possibly even more than 200 Hertz, there's a high chance that at least 2 of them will conflict from time to time. Yeah, luckily, this was a very simple fix. I just set a priority for each sensor and, well, that seemed to work. So I merged in the old I2C code, radio code, and all the other code I used for the previous launch in preparation for the upcoming launch. So I plugged in the board, uploaded the code, and it ran at 42 Hertz. So after a bit of disappointment, I spent way too long trying to figure out what the issue was, only to realize I did something kind of stupid. A few months ago before the first flight, when I was putting together the basic sensor drivers, and specifically in this case, the MS5611 barometer driver, I just hacked in the required timing from the datasheet. It required a certain amount of time before and after certain things, as shown in the function here, in order to correctly process the data. Which, I don't know if you've already put it together or not, but those delays were running every single time I ran the loop, which, in this case, that 20 milliseconds, is about 80, almost 90% of the remaining delay in my code. So those delays are my problem. And to fix it, I did something that's probably not correct and probably not ideal. I simply just flipped the order and removed the delay. I made it check for new data at the beginning, then ask for new data. Then every time I called it, it just grabbed the previous set of data. It's not perfect, but I mean, at this point it was 3 a.m. and I was getting quite tired, so I ran with it and uploaded the code. Seemed to work. I went to bed to get ready for the launch, and then basically, I think it was 5 hours at that point. Little note from while I was editing this. I say that there were no issues and it seemed to be working. There was an issue going on behind the scenes. I'm not going to get into it in this video, as, well, I actually didn't know at the time. But I'll get into it in the next video. But let's just say the files were even larger than they were supposed to be, due to, honestly, kind of a stupid error that I made, but either way, it worked and I got the data, so let's get back to the video. So, I was dead, the code was barely working, but I was off to go launch the rocket. So.
Here it goes! 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Both flights used an Aerotech F52-8 reload, so their acceleration should be relatively similar between the two of them, but the more recent of the two flights did use a parachute release, so there'll be some differences in the altitude data when we get to that stage. But first, let's go over the accelerometer data. Right here is Flight 3, right here is Flight 4. Overall, when you zoom out, they are quite similar, but if I zoom into the individual stages of the flight, starting with the acceleration or the boost, the beginning of the burn, you'll notice that there's a lot fewer data points on Flight 3 compared to Flight 4. In this case, the gap in Flight 3 is the 32 Hertz rate, which, when you work it out, works out to roughly 3.1 meters of distance between each reading when the rocket was traveling at its top speed, versus on this one where it's actually running at about 100 Hertz. So the gap is closer to 1 meter between each reading. Still decent gap, but over 3 times better compared to this one. So while both of them are viable data to show after the fact what happened, this new flight gives me a lot more fine and detailed data, allowing me to more accurately view when the ignition happened, when the parachute deployed. You can see the spike of the ejection as well as the spike of when the parachute opened, which isn't on this one as, well, there was no chute release, so it was a lot simpler. Like the parachute deployed at apogee and it was smooth from there. But overall, there's just a lot more data I can work with on this one. So now let's talk about the barometers. Here's flight 3, here's flight 4. Obviously the barometers output pressure, not altitude. So with a little bit of math, we can convert these pressure values to the altitude that the rocket achieved. In flight 3, that was roughly 1,080 feet, and kind of left the rail at a slight angle, so I'm assuming it was a bit lower because of that. And flight 4 hit roughly 1,200 feet. In this case, it flew almost perfectly vertical, and that 1,200 aligns with the theoretical maximum of that motor for this rocket. Overall though, the increased logging rate didn't actually help the barometer at all. In this case, this one's running at 32 Hertz, this one is running at 25. I decreased it a bit to save on bandwidth and on memory, but in this case, the valuable part is that decrease in descent rate at the bottom. That comes from the chute release. While small, that little bit of data there, that decrease in descent rate, helped validate that my board is at least mostly correct, because it detected that decrease at 391 feet. The board, or in this case the chute release, was set to release the parachute at 400 feet. So if the parachute was released at 400 feet, took a second to open up, and my board detected that at 391 feet. It aligns fairly closely with the commercial product and is more than accurate enough for what I need as of now. So while this isn't that big of a deal, the fact that it aligns with the commercial product is probably one of the bigger achievements of this flight, just helping prove that this system is relatively accurate, or at least accurate enough for me to continue testing. So now the original problem has been solved. The rocket has gone from logging at 32 Hertz and not getting enough information to now logging at 100 plus Hertz, in some cases up to 200 if I wanted to. But that introduces a new problem. It's now logging at 70 kilobytes per second. With the maximum storage size of 16 megabytes, that 70 kilobytes per second fills it up fairly quick. In the case of Flight 4 that you were just looking at earlier, the final log size for that was 14.4 megabytes, almost entirely filling up the internal storage. So while I'm now getting more valuable data, this more valuable data needs space, and upping the rate drastically increases the space requirements. And the second key issue is that the SD card code from early in development is not optimized for these larger file sizes and is leading to minute-plus file transfers from the flash to the SD card. Diving a little deeper into that issue, SD cards have a few ways they can communicate, but the simplest is SPI, which, if you run a few numbers, look at the theoretical maximum transfer rate, it can theoretically do 1.3-ish megabytes per second, which should be fine, like 10, 11 seconds transfer for a full file shouldn't be a problem. But not only is my code not efficiently transferring it, it's also transferring it one line at a time. And when you transfer one line at a time from flash to an SD card, there's a little bit of overhead to write that to the SD card. Might only be 1, 2, 5 milliseconds, give or take, which isn't much when you're only writing one line of data. But these files are getting large, and I'm writing tens to hundreds of thousands of small little lines of data per flight. So that 5 milliseconds adds up to sometimes 5 minutes. So, albeit it's a simple fix, I need to go in and rewrite some of my SD logging code to basically block it together and write chunks. It wasn't an issue originally, and it hasn't been an issue until now, but I guess fixing one problem often reveals new problems that you weren't planning on dealing with in the first place. But even if I do solve that problem, the problem of storage space is still a thing. The log was 14.4 megabytes. With a 16 megabyte total flash size, that's the maximum I can do for one flight. There are some optimizations I could do, like convert it to binary instead of simple, Excel doc or CSV file. But even at that, it's still like limiting how long a flight can be if I'm running the sensors at max speed. So that leads into some future things that I'll need to work on, like state estimation, so I can vary the logging rate depending on the stage of the flight, so the sensors can more accurately measure the state. Like during a launch, it's at the highest speed, slows down during descent, drops off when it lands. Right now, I'm just running after this thing with my laptop, typing in disarm to stop it from logging as soon as it lands, which isn't really that efficient. Either way, I need to improve the efficiency of my code rather than just throwing on more storage, because, that does work, but I can only go so far with that. So a lot has happened with SDL, and it's now in a completely different situation. These sensors are logging a lot faster, the firmware is no longer holding back the logging rate, and the data from these last few flights has been a lot higher quality. The push to improve the firmware over the last few weeks has removed a lot of the bottlenecks that SDL has been facing, but it also discovered a few new ones. So now to the plan from the last video. Right now, SDL is roughly here, and a lot of these points have changed, things have updated, so actually, you know what? Scrap that plan. Here's the new one. SDL is still at stage 2. There's still a lot that needs done, but overall, this is the plan going forwards for the upcoming videos. And while it's still probably a ways off, these changes are helping me refine my plan for my future flight controller. While it's still in the early planning stages, all of this is helping me kind of figure out what's needed, what's not, what design decisions I should update going forwards into the next design. For that matter, if you have any ideas that you might want me to put into the flight controller or you think's a good idea to add to the flight controller, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, going into this video, SDL had quite an issue with logging rate, and well, now I've got to solve the issue with storage space. Either way, see you next time.